We're at the top of 54a. Last word on the fourth line. Tana. We have a brisa. Nevad, an animal that was worshipped. Shalo asar. If it's your animal, then it's forbidden as a korban. V'shal chavero mutar. But if it belongs to somebody else, then you can use it because you can't make somebody else's property prohibited. Urmina. So we're going to ask the question from another brisa. Ezu nefet. What's the case of an animal that is neba that has been worshipped for Avodah Zarah? Kol she'ovdim oso. Any animal that people worship, bein b'shogeg bein b'mezid, whether did it accidentally or purposely, bein b'onus bein b'rason, whether they were forced to or they did it willingly. High onus hechadami. Now, what are we talking about? An onus done unwillingly. How can you force such a case? Wouldn't it be by worshiping someone else's animal? So you're forcing that person to have an animal. He didn't do anything to the animal. You worship the animal. So isn't that what we're talking about? So that would contradict our brisa. No, it's when you, the owner of the animal, were forced at gunpoint by someone, presumably a non-Jew, to worship your own animal. Okay, so that's an ones. So maskis of Zarah ones Rahman Patre. Right, the Gemara, the Torah says if you've been forced to do something that way, then you're off the hook. The case, the original case is when a girl or woman is raped. Um, Nara Marosa, she is blameless and she doesn't get any punishment. Amarava Ella Hakol Hayu Bichlal Tavim. So here's how every every kind of idolatry is forbidden. But when the Torah says, and then you should live through these mitzvahs, which implies you shouldn't die for them. Yatsa ones. So that excludes being forced. But then the Torah says, after that, don't profane my name. The afilu ba'ones, even that would be that we understand to be even by force if you're forced to. Okay, so what are we talking about? The difference is when do you have to that's if it's private. But when it says but don't do it anyway, don't do it as if it's in public. So therefore, an animal that was worshipped, even um, um, so but from the fact that you can't do it in public, even when you're being forced to, indicates that it is still idolatry. Okay, so we have a case where you were forced to worship the animal in public, and then you're still um, and you did it, you should have forfeited your life. So if you didn't do it, then the animal is considered avodah zarah with regard to bringing it to as a korban in the Beis Hamikdash. Amalei Rabban LeRava, so the rabbi said to Rava, Tanya the Messiah. Um, here's a further support for you. Bimusaos of the kochavim b'shas Zarah, like pedestals of avodah zarah that were put up when the government was forcing you to do so. Alf b'shek batla, even now the government has overturned that decree, or that decree is no longer in force. Osan bimusos lo batlu. Those pedestals of idolatry are still idolatry. So this is a case of being forced in public to tolerate idolatry, and it's a lasting prohibition. Amalus or Rava said, Imishum ha, no, that's not such a good proof for me. Lotusayan, that's not a proof. Amar Yisrael Mumar Hava Upalach Labaratson. You could say that why in that case do we say that those pedestals for the Avodah Zarah statues are still forbidden? Maybe some Jew willingly worshipped them. Um, So Ravashi said, "Lo tema emar." Uh, Actually, you shouldn't say. You could say that. That's definitely the reason. Um, there was you must say, you must admit that there, in such a case, um, there must have been Jewish idolaters, because of the circumstances, when the government is forcing people to apostasy, you can be sure that it actually worked in some cases. Chizkiyahu, Kagon nisech lavos kochavim yain al karneha. The second brisa is talking about a case where the idolater actually poured wine on the animal for idolatry. So the case where the brisa, which says that a second person can force your animal into idolatrous status, is when you actually poured the wine over the animal's horns. So then um, there was like a physical action taken to the animal. So even though it wasn't your action, that still becomes forbidden. Maski for Ava Hai Nevatu, that is what you want to call Neva, an animal that was worshipped. Hai Bimus Bialmahu. That's not, you're not worshiping the animal. You're using the animal as an altar of sorts for your libation, but you're not worshiping the animal. Um, the Chihad Yasa Ulam Rav Yochanan, and that's like Rav Ula said in the name of Rav Yochanan. Even though it is true that bowing down to your friend's animal can't make it forbidden, right? Because it's not yours to make an avodah zarah. Asbamasa asara, but if you do an action on it, that still makes it prohibited. Rav Nachman says, Pukba Amru Ula, go tell Ula, Kvarti Gemara Rav Huna Lishmatech Babavel. You think you're being so clever. Rav Huna preceded you already. He already said this. Rav Huna Haisa Behemas Chaver Rav Rutza Bifnei Avodah Chachavim, Avodas Chachavim. If someone else's animal is lying on the floor in front of an idol. As soon as you start to slaughter that animal, even if you're not as an offering to the idol, so then even if it's not your animal, it becomes asar. So even though it's not your animal, if you do this action on it, an avodah zarah action on the animal, i.e., you slaughter it, then it becomes forbidden as avodah. Um, Now, Mino and Dasara. So, what's the source that this is the case? Elam Mikoanim. So, if you want to say it's from the idea that uh, um, a Kohen who served in an idolatrous temple is no longer eligible to be a Kohen to do the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash. Maybe that's the source. Okay, so a Kohen, an animal or an object, the animal is not can't decide to do anything, right? You pour wine over the animal's horns. It's not like the animal knows enough to protest, to try and get away, to try to not be a platform for avodah zarah, but a person, should know better, right? So maybe Kohanim indeed are forbidden once they've done avodah or once they've done service in an idolatrous temple, they can no longer do the avodah. But if an animal has had something done to it, you can't say necessarily the same thing. Maybe you want to know it from the stones of the mizbeach. So the idea here is that once the Greeks um, the Mishnah tells us that once the Greeks used the actual mizbeach in the Beis Hamikdash for idolatry, those stones could no longer be used. So again, maybe that's the source, that if you do an action on these stones, they're um, useful for the mikdash. Vidoma could Rav Papa, but maybe that's not a good. Maybe that is in accordance with Rav Papa, because Rav Papa taught there that Yeah, that by invading the Beis Hamikdash, everything became hefker, and it became Greek property, as it were, and um, so then it's their own property that they're making. So we're trying to say that you can't make someone else's property of Avodah Zarah, but in this case, once the Greeks took it over, it became their property. So they're doing it to their own property. So that's a different case. You can't apply one to the other. Viella, so maybe there's another source. Mikaelin.
And why does Rashi say it? I'm not. I don't find. V'darash shiatzu lechulin v'kanum dilma Rav
Kanom of the Kochavim. Like they've become, once the Greeks took over the Beis Hamikdash, then everything was desacred, deconsecrated, as it were, because it changed ownership. Right, it's no longer in the possession of the Jewish people; it's now in the possession of the Greeks, um, and they acquire it that way.
Oh, so then it's no longer usher, but
Then
v'yakulu
it's no
l'Israel.
longer then they're no longer making your someone else is making it's no longer a case of someone else making your thing of Avodah Zarah. No, it's their thing now, and they can make it of you can with no everyone understands that you can make your own stuff of Avodah Zarah, right? The only question is somebody else's. So what we're saying is that when the Greeks took over the Beis Hamikdash, they acquired the thing, and when they then used it for Avodah Zarah, certainly they made it forbidden for future Mikdash use because they did Avodah Zarah on their own stuff. It becomes forbidden for uses in the Beis Hamikdash.
Right. Okay. And he says v'yak. What's the word? V'yachlu l'asran. Or it became.
The Asran, yeah, then they have the ability to make something forbidden because they're doing avodah
Oh,
zarah on what is now their own stuff.
v'yachlu.
Yeah.
Where do we put the vowels? I wasn't sure where that. Okay.
Okay. V'ela mikalim. So maybe the idea comes from the kalim of the Beis Hamikdash, the Klei Hakodesh, Shechsiv. Um, so this is the in the time of King Achaz. Eskala kelim asher hizniach hamelech Achaz b'malchuso b'ma'alo hechenu v'ikdashnu. Everything that all the kelim that King Achaz um, uh, abandoned during his reign, we've sanctified them again. So V'yamar, and how do we explain that pasuk? Heichanu shegenaznu. Um, when it says that we took steps, Heichanu, we took some steps. What are the steps? Shegenaznu. We put them away, right? We hid them. V'hikdashnu shekdashnu achem tachtayim. We didn't use those. We created new vessels for the mikdash. So so how is it that Achaz was able to make these no longer valid for the mikdash? They weren't his. But maybe so. The only way we can understand that is that since he did an avodah zarah on them, and he made them aser, and it wasn't his. So this is a good proof for Rav Huna that um, that generally you can't make someone else's stuff aser, but if you did an act, an idolatrous act on it or with it, then that's enough to make it aser, even if it's not yours. And that's Rav Huna's source is this incident with King Achaz. Okay,
So King
Kiyosar.
Achaz, he performed avodah zarah on it, or he
Yeah,
performed.
he was a wicked king and
Right.
of it was. Kiaz Rav Nimi Amar Rav Yochanan. When Rav Nimi came, he said in the name of Rav Yochanan, Af al pisha amru shamishach v'lekarka olam la'asara. Even though we've said that if you bow to something, to a mountain, a rock, whatever, something that is attached to the earth, that doesn't make it avodah zarah. Chafar ba'boros shichun umaros asara. But if you did some work in it, if you dug something, right, you dug a pit or a ditch or whatever. As an act of idolatry, then that can prohibit the thing. Shmuel came, he said in the name of Rav Yochanan, and even though we've said you can't make a living being an animal by bowing down to it, you can't make it an avodah zarah. Asan chalifin lavodas kochavim asaran. But if you exchange it for an idol, like then like you try to redeem it, as it were, with an animal, then the animal actually does become aser. Kielsa Ravin Omar, when Ravin came, he said, Pligo Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbanan. There's an argument about this between Rabbi Shmuel and the rabbis. Chanam Chalifin Asurin, Chanam Chalifin Mutari. One says that an exchange like this it's the animal becomes prohibited, and the other says no, it doesn't. And the other one says that even like you keep exchanging it, you exchange this animal for an idol, you exchange the animal for another animal. It never sheds the being tainted by the original Avodah Zarah. My Talmud demand Khalifa Khalifa Nasurin. Why would you say that? Amakra v'hayisa cherem kamohu. You'll become if you if you deal with avodah zarah, you'll become you'll be a cherem. You'll be forbidden like it. Kol shata mahaya mimenu hareyu kamo. In other words, if you if the animal actually takes the place of the avodah zarah to such an extent that it has all the attributes of it, including that it can pass it on to the next exchange. Vidach, but the other one would say, Amakra, who? Cherem Ha'isa Kamo, who? Only that one becomes the true Cherem, but then it loses its power to pass that on. Huvelo Chalife Chalipin, it loses its power to pass that on. Vidach. So what do you do with with the word kamohu? That excludes arla and the forbidden fruit of the first 3 years, and kalayim, she'im, mecharan, v'kidesh b'dmeim. If you sell one of these things and use the money, then you're not supposed to use them, but you use the money that you got for it to marry someone, which indicates that you have ownership of that money. It works. So the Vaisachem Kamohu doesn't refer to Avodah Zarah, but it refers to only that original Isur of Orla or Kalaya Kerem is forbidden. But what you exchange it for, the money you get for it, is not forbidden.
What do we say about the exchange with the Avodah Zarah? Does the original Avodah Zarah retain its status of Avodah Zarah even if we're exchanging it and onward? And
Yes.
all of these animals and all of these items and books and shelves and cars, they all became Avodah Zarah?
Yeah, that's right. That's the well, there's three opinions here, right? One is yes, the other is no, and the other is only the first one. Only the first time you exchange it.
Only the first time.
Yeah,
So
there's no chain.
okay, but in that case, the third opinion, do the first two items retain their Avodah Zarah then?
Yes.
Both of them.
Yes.
So this is different from like Shviat in Pidyon. When you exchange the money, you have
Exactly.
the fruit, you put it on the money, you put it on something, then that product is chilo. It's no longer cut, it's no longer Shviat, that fruit. Once you
Right. So it's like an invalid exchange for hektish. If you try to do what's the word for it?
Pidyon? No.
No, there's the word for it that
Um,
flew out of my head. But if you try to exchange lo yachlifena, right?
Tamura?
If you Tamura,
Tamura?
yes, yes, right, Tamura. Thank you. If you try to invalidly exchange one for the other, then both of them still have the status of heknish, similar to
Right.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about that in Pesachim, Korban Pesach, the Shlomim, and before then, if you exchange it,
Yeah. Right. Ve'idach. So what about so now we're still in the middle of the session. So like, why do you um like so if we're using this pasuk for Arla and Kilayim, so how can you use it for Avodah Zarah? The other one says no. Arla and Kilayim lo tzrichim yuta. You don't need to a special pasuk for Arla and Kilayim. V'havilu avos kachavim shvis shnei ksuvim habayim ke'achad, because idolatry and shvis would be two things that we're taught the same thing. You can't apply that to something else. So it's only shvis and idolatry that have this rule, and not kilayim and orla. Avodas
Yeah.
kachavim hadamar. So where do we get the idea for avodas kachavim? Well, that's what we've been reading about. Where do we get this idea for shvis that you can't exchange it? Shvis t'chsiv ki yovel hi kodesh ti'alachem. It's a yovel year. It should be holy to you. Ma kodesh tofes es damar b'altar. So just like hekdesh, it. The value of it is it's like it has sanctity that extends to its value. In other words, if you exchange it, Ashvi stuff has a so we see that about Shvis also. So now we have two things. The Torah tells us the same thing about Shvis and about Avodah Zarah, and Sheksu Kechad Ein Melamdim. So you wouldn't apply it to Arla and Kalaya Kerem, and so you don't need a pasuk for it. So the
But a
Gemara says,
shviut,
wait.
but shviut, I would learn that you can transfer it. It goes to the money, right, and so forth to the next object. I mean, well, at that point, once you make the exchange, that product can then be used, right? The fruit,
No, where do you get that?
I thought from the Mishnah and Shviut, they can make once you put the value on the money, then the money obtains, and this product is no longer kodesh for considered kodesh, and I think that's one of the Mishnah and Shviut in Masechta Shviut.
Mm,
I thought so, from what I remember.
right. Um, I don't know. I'm seeing a quote from Mishnah and Perak Chas and Shvis that it's that it does not lose its kedusha.
It's not.
So you have to show me chapter and verse. I'm not aware of that Mishnah that you're. I mean, that doesn't mean it's
I'll
not
look
there.
at
It just means I don't remember it.
okay, I'll look it up. I have to find
Okay.
it. I thought that you can once you transfer that onto money or another object, then that product doesn't contain the
I
kedusha.
mean, that works for like Master Sheni, for example. I don't know about Shvis.
Right, my Sheni for sure. I thought Shavuot is, but I could be wrong. I have to look it up then. Okay.
Okay, please do. So we're not done yet. Ima kodesh tov is dom v'yosi l'chulin, af shvis tofesis dom v'yosi l'chulin. Well, wait a minute. Hekdesh you can redeem, so maybe shvis you should be able to redeem also. Talmud lomar tiyeh. The words it should stay that way. B'havyasa tehei. It stays. The shvis stays as it is, unlike hekdesh. Haketzad lakach b'peros shvis basar. If you buy. You trade your shvis, your produce for meat. Elvielum is barim b'shvis. Then both of them have the shvis status and have to be treated accordingly. Lachav basar dagim. And then let's say you trade the meat for fish. Yatsa basar nichlas dagim. So the meat becomes okay. And the fish becomes shvis, but dagim yain. Then you exchange it for wine. Yasu dagim nichnas yain. Then the wine becomes forbidden. But yain shemen, yasu yain nichnas shemen. Haketzad achron nispas shvis. So the last thing still retains its shvis status. Upriyatzmo aser. The original shvis is always shvis. The last thing you exchange it for has the kedusha shvis, and the things in the middle they can shed their kedusha shvis.
Oh, so there's an aspect here that when you transfer the other things are not do not have the kedusha shviut.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Seems like you're right. Yeah.
It's the last thing certainly has a
According to
kedusha
this
shviut,
opinion, yeah.
and the
Mhm.
first one still has shviut. That I didn't remember, but certainly in all that there is a Mishnah where there's transfer, and it's the last thing that retains the shviut, but nothing else in between. But here it says that the first product is also has
Yes,
kedusha
the
shviut.
original shvis cannot be unshvised.
Is that a word? Anshavis?
No, I just made it up. Ve'idach. So what about the other opinion that thinks you do need the pasuk to tell you this, like you wouldn't know it anyway? Ve'idach chasavar shnei ksuva b'kechad milamdim. Yeah, you want to say that you have two rules that the Torah says, and then you can't generalize it. I say you can generalize it. And that's why it says kamohu to tell you that this applies to Orlan Shvi's also. Okay. Next Mishnah, Sholos Oskein Barami. They asked the Chachamim in Ram. Im ein ritzolo bavodas chachavim. So God doesn't like idolatry. Lamein levatla. So let him get rid of those chachavim. God has the power either to um, um, why does he allow them to stick around?
But the
So yeah,
people, but there's sun and moon and stars, and what there'd be a dark place, the world then.
yeah, the idea is so God can find another way to illuminate the world, right? Where there was light before the sun was created, right? Um, so they answered, if people would worship just, idols, fine. But this is your point, Ken, that people are worshiping the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellations. Those we need those things. So because people are stupid, so God should destroy the sun, should destroy the world. Okay, fine. I understand about the sun and the moon. But what about idols, right? The world could get along fine without idols. But let them leave the sun and the moon and destroy the idols. They said, then you could also argue that we are um, encouraging the worship of the sun and the moon, Sha'omrim, because people say Tedun Shein Elohos. By saying that they're necessary for the world, that kind of implies that they're divine. Um, so they're kind of in other words, if God would destroy all the other idols but leave in place the ones that are necessary for the operation of the world, then people would indeed assign divinity to those things by saying, "Oh, look, the sun and the moon, they didn't like their competition of stone idols, and they destroyed them." So there's no way out for God, as it were. Tanarama. Shalu Philosophin as Kenny Barami. They asked the Chachamim and Ram. God doesn't want idol worship. Same question. Ilu V'davar Shayin Sarich B'Hei if it were something that the world doesn't need, like just rocks, so he would get rid of them. But people worship the sun and the moon. Should God destroy the world because of these idiots? God allows the world to continue to spin. Vishotim shall kill kulu asidin. God lets you make the mistake, right? If you're stupid enough to worship idols, you'll pay for it in the end. Davar acher. Here's a similar thing. Haresha gazal shalchitim. If you stole a measure of wheat, v'halach uzra b'karka, and you go and plant it. Dinhu shelo titzmach. Maybe God shouldn't allow it to grow, right? Because you did wrong. But it does grow. The world continues to spin as it does. In other words, don't expect God to correct all your mistakes. Another example. You commit adultery. So it should be that she shouldn't become pregnant. Rather, God allows the world to function as it does. And people who are foolish, they will pay for their mistakes. V'hain Rish Lakish, and this is what Rish Lakish said. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, God says, "L'dayin l'shem shosin selish li pumbi." It's not bad enough that people use my sela, translates here as my signet ring. Um, so in other words, my people are created in the image of God, just like when you use a stamp, you're recreating the image on the stamp. Um, so it's not enough that the Rishayim, the wicked people, um, El Shematrichin Osi Machtimin Osi Bal Karchi. They also like force me, as it were, to um, to use it improperly. In other words, if you commit adultery and produce a child, that's God's child, right? It's made in the image of God, even though it was conceived illicitly. So God is saying it's like, that people are using my own tools against me, as it were. Shal Philosophos Echad is Rabban Gamliel. A philosopher asked Rabban Gamliel, Kosem Tarasim, Ki Hashem Elokecha Eish Ochalahu Elkanah. God is a burning fire, a consuming fire, a jealous God. Mipnei Ma Miskane Be'ovdeh. Why is he jealous? Be'en Miskane Ba. Um, so, like, God punishes the idol worshippers, but he leaves the idols themselves be. Amalo Emshal Chamash. I'll give you a parable. Lamad Avadam, the king has one son. Also, ben and that son had a dog, a pet dog. And he called the dog by his father's name. When he would take an oath, he would say, "I swear by the life of Richard the dog." Um, so now, who's the king going to get angry at? The son or the dog, right? Albenu is going to get angry at the son, the one who made who is doing this improper action. Or is he angry at the dog? Right? He's going to be angry at the son. So similarly, the God gets angry not at the idol that doesn't have any will in this matter. It's a piece of stone. He rather gets angry at the people who worship the idol, who should know better. Amarlam. So you answer them, Kalavat Hakaria. So you're calling you're making a mashal that the idol, this my deity is a dog. V'lo yesh mamish. Um, but um, but idols, like he's saying, I think that the idols actually have will and power and so on. Like you can't compare it to a dog. The dog, I understand the mashal. The dog has no choice here. There's no choice. The dog doesn't know what's going on, but the idol knows what's going on. Um, Amar Lo Mari, so Sir Gamaliel says, prove it. Like, what do you think why do you think that the idol has anything to it? Amar Lo, Pamachas Nafla Deleko Birin. And one time there was a fire. Venisra Kol Kula, the whole city burned down. They also but the temple didn't burn down. So clearly the idol has power. Gamaliel says to him, I'll give you a parable. There's a king that one of the provinces rebelled. So when the king goes to war, does he fight the living or the dead? He fights the living. So in other words, God sent this fire. Like, who's he going to kill? He's going to kill those who are worshiping the idol. The idol itself, God doesn't really care about because he knows it has no power. So he answered back, Kelvat Kariosa, you're calling the god a dog. Mata Kariosa. Mesa Kariosa, you're calling him a dog or a dead person. In Cain, Yabdena Minolam. Let God, if God thinks that this idol is so impotent, let him just get rid of it. If it were something that the world doesn't need, he would get rid of it. But people worship things that are part of the natural order and are needed for the natural order. Should God destroy the world because of these idiots? Asof asef kol me'al pnei ha'adamanu Hashem. The pasuk says, "Do I have to like destroy everything from the earth?" Asef adamu vehema asef of hashamayim u'degei hayam v'hamachshelo says harishayim. Do I have to destroy the people and animals, birds, fish, and all of the things that people trip over? In other words, all the things that people worship. And because wicked people worship them, so I should destroy the objects of worship. They also worship people. right? People can become demigods or gods. So am I supposed to destroy everything that gets worshipped? I'll end up destroying not only the whole world, all the people in it, etc., etc. Um, and we will stop here for today. Have a good day, everybody.